Hey, you guys, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. This is Crossing Complex Intersections using accessible pedestrian signals. I'm going to make it so that if you're here live, you're not going to be able to unmute yourself, but please, you are welcome to chat. Use this opportunity to talk with your friends. This presentation is presented by the International Orientation and Mobility Online Symposium. The planning committee every year really looks at what are the needed skills that we want to share with you in the short amount of time that we have. And our guest expert, Hekmarie Tosalo, came up with this incredible idea, and over 400 of you guys registered. And so I really hope that we do you the most justice. Hekmarie has a master's degree in O&M from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. She's a TBI in comms, and she lived in Puerto Rico her whole life. And she's now in the mainland US, and she's been a TBI comms for at least the past 5 years. She's also an O&M Symposium Planning Committee member. And through her social media platforms, she raises awareness about visual impairments one post at a time. If you are not following her, you definitely should be. She can be found on Instagram at Miss Tosado Comms for English-speaking audiences and Facebook at Miss Tosado for Spanish-speaking audiences. And I'm Cassie Maloney. I'm an orientation and mobility specialist, and I've been in the field for a hot minute. I'm also the founder of Allied Independence. We provide 21st century teaching techniques to help you get your learners to be more independent without you burning out. And really, that's my passion, is just making sure that I can give back to you guys at such a high level and really enjoy these conversations in a way that connects you with your friends and other people who really get what you do and all of your struggles, and allows you to leave work on time. Granted, of course, today is a little bit different. So what you're going to walk away with by the end of this training is a better understanding of accessible pedestrian signals, how to teach crossings at complex lighted intersections using the APS, and what to do if they don't work. I see Meg Robertson in here because we are borrowing from a lot of her work. If you don't follow her, if you don't go to any of her presentations, you absolutely have to. She is incredible. And you'll get to actually hear from her because we're borrowing a snippet of one of her presentations that she's done with us in the past that really lays a good foundation for what we're talking about in a way that I can't really do myself because I'm not her, you know what I mean? But each of these strategies can be implemented by any O&M specialist, no matter what type of learners you have or how few complex intersections your town has. Because what we're doing is we're going to be providing you the framework, and then you are going to individualize your teaching as always. And what you're going to quickly notice is that this isn't a webinar just with statistics or fluff that you can't use. We're really here to show you what works and how to do it. And yes, you will have the opportunity to learn how you can grow more after this training. Once you've seen just how a few of these quick things that we're going to teach you can really change the trajectory of your teaching, you're definitely going to want to know more. And I will say that we can't cover it all. There's just so much. So we're going to graze the top and give you a really good understanding of the formula, and then allow you to find places where you can go deeper. But I'm not going to waste your time talking about that so much during this training. I'd rather deliver on what you actually signed up for, which is being able to understand how to use APS devices. So what O&Ms take action, they get to experience so much. Julie said that the O&M Symposium is such a great way to learn and collaborate with so many other O&Ms from different countries. It's an eye-opener to see what strategies work and what strategies don't work, and get great ideas from the community that isn't large to begin with. She appreciates all the hard work to make this symposium worth the meaningful experience. Okay. But there are a few things I want you to take note before we actually get into our program. The first is that if you're a seasoned O&M, you're going to quickly notice that these are not the way that we've always done things or regurgitated basic information, but there are strategies that work regardless of the type of learners you have, how big your caseload is, because they follow proven principles of 21st century education, which I'm really big on, and current O&M protocols that are working today. We have consulted with quite a few of the experts in the field just to make sure that we are portraying the best information, even though we can't go really deep today. And also, the best teachers are still students. When we can continue to grow and discover innovative strategies from thought leaders, we are much more successful. We have a question in the chat asking where the form is. It is right above you in the chat. So Diane, if you would please put that form again, because they may not be able to see it. Okay, great. All right. If you're watching the replay, it's down below this video because the video will be on an all access page. But if you want to increase your teaching skills, it's not just about like this one skill, right? What we're looking at as teachers is following 21st century education. And I'll show you why in a second. But what 21st century education does is it really directly links where that learner is actually going with where you're teaching right now. And so instead of having to guess or instead of teaching to the wrong thing, you get to make that direct link and go home on time, because that's my big thing. As O&Mers, we often ask, how do I get there from here? Teaching APS skills, is one prime example of how you can incorporate 21st century education into your teaching, because we know that intersections have changed. They used to be really simple. This is a plus-shaped intersection. It's a two-way stop. There's not even a curb cut. It was just like, this is how the intersection is. And now they're so much more complex. This picture is taken from Japan, and it's during the exclusive pedestrian crossing cycle. Oh my gosh. Somebody just said that my screen is not shared. Can you guys let me know if I'm not sharing my screen? And now it is very complex. Still, we've got really big intersections. Again, this one is in Japan, but it's just a great example of like, this could be coming to us very soon. But it's not just intersections that are changing. The entire education system was designed to create industrial workers. You can see the direct link from the students on the right sitting in desks with the teacher at the front, and then the industrial workers sitting also in desks in rows with the boss at the front. That's why we have the cafeteria. That's why we have the bells. That's why we have to ask to go to the bathroom. But our education system hasn't really changed. And honestly, we grew up in that past system. The thing is, the world has. Now, most people are turning into digital nomads. That wasn't even a thing when I was in college, and I cannot wait for my kids to get out of school so I can be like, bye, I'm leaving, because we don't have to live the way that we used to. The problem is that the demands of adulthood and independent living skills aren't the same as they used to be, but we keep teaching the way that we used to. And continuing to teach in the ways that we used to actually hinders our current learners. If you're still teaching street crossings in the way that they used to be taught, even when I was in school, you're probably doing it wrong. And that's why we stay on top of the current teaching models and the teaching framework. 21st century teaching prepares students with the skills needed to succeed in a rapidly changing world, because the truth is we are preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. So we have to really think outside of the box. This is from Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative. The link is attached to this document. It's a really cool document to read, even though it's obviously just for Americans, but it goes worldwide, and it says that the type of skills American students need to succeed are very different from the past. Rote memorization of facts is not a skill set that's needed. Now, the thing that's needed is how to use ChatGPT. How many of you guys are having conversations like that? Like, how can I use ChatGPT to do this or do that, or even like send a text or I use ChatGPT to find this. I was like, hey, I really want to read a good article in this. How can I find that? And ChatGPT gave me 5 different articles. And I was like, cool. But even 2 years ago, I didn't need that skill. Neither did my learners. And so I have to stay on top of it all. The key to increasing your students' O&M skills isn't just in how you're teaching, but how effectively you are preparing them for their future. So the strategies that you're about to get are designed to increase your impactful teaching by combining 21st century education principles with current roadway mandates and O&M protocol. But as you pay attention, I want you to listen for the last one. And here's where Joyce comes in. Oh my gosh, Joyce, I just so appreciate having you in our community. And she said that the O&M Symposium has become a gold standard for professional development in the world of O&M. How many of you guys are already signed up? We have over, what, Diane, it was like 240 something people when I saw at least yesterday. It's incredible the fact that we haven't even gone over our agenda yet. Yay, Larry's coming. I know we have a bunch in here. And it's just so wonderful that we get to do all of this and to be able to stay on top of the newest and best information out there. So what we really want to look at is how has street crossing protocols changed? I'm going to show you two excerpts from the International O&M Online Symposium from last year. This is Meg. She's in the room. Absolutely incredible. And it was entitled Accessible Pedestrian Signals, What Do I Need to Know? And that went through all accessible pedestrian signals. So we're going to show two separate clips of hers. The first being how, we're not going to go into everything that she says, but I really want you to listen to what she talks about fixed and actuated signals, because that's something new that's coming up everywhere. And even at the baseline level, this is where accessible pedestrian signals are being
fixed
placed.
time versus actuated time intersections. Now, when I started, it was all fixed time. North-South Street went, East-West Street went. North-South Street went, East-West Street went. That's no longer true. So actuated is that it's time with what traffic is on. Sometimes the main street always has the green unless a car comes up on the side street and actuates that they're waiting and it's their turn to go and the light will switch. That's a semi-actuated intersection. We also have concurrent PED phases, which is, again, like fixed time. East-West street's going. That means it's parallel traffic. I can cross the South-North street or opposite. There's traffic moving in the intersection while the walk signal is on. Exclusive PED phase is it holds all traffic. No traffic is moving, and there's usually no right on red for exclusive PED phase, and that you can move, either do a diagonal or move across. Again, that has its plus and minuses for blind pedestrians. There is now something called the leading pedestrian interval, and that is allowing pedestrians to start their crossing when there's no traffic moving in the intersection. It is a concurrent pedestrian phase, but they have a few seconds to start their crossing before the parallel traffic starts up. So that gives them a little more clearance to get in the intersection and car. They might be more noticed by cars, especially left-hand turning. We'll go over that, why that's a problem for legally blind pedestrians. And there's just a whole bunch of new type of walk signals that are coming. Sorry, my thing's not flipping the way it should. Okay, fixed signal controllers. Again, they have a fixed length of time, north-south traffic, east-west traffic. Walk signal comes on. They can be concurrent, exclusive. They may be automatic or activated by the pedestrian. So they may automatically come on, north-south traffic goes, east-west traffic goes, walk signal comes on. Usually it's fixed time. Or you have to call the walk signal for more a exclusive pedestrian phase to be sure that it's your time to walk. Again, never taught walk signals because there was no accessible pedestrian signal. So I never taught anybody at the beginning of my career how to use a walk signal because they were useless to people. So fixed signal controllers. Again, this is how we used to do it in the old days. Peds with vision loss learn to cross streets using traffic noise and be able to judge the traffic flow at when the best time it was for them to cross. We still do that in a lot of different intersections. So actuated signal controllers, which is the big change, is that they have indicators that are not fixed in length of time. So it just fluctuates on volume, traffic volumes. And they don't want to, they minimize the interruption to traffic flow on major street. Now, issues for blind pedestrians is you cannot judge when the time is time to cross the street. the unreliability of traffic cycle timing. It's essential now with an actuated control, a fully actuated controller intersection, is you have to call your walk signal phase by pushing the button to have enough time to cross the street. If you start your crossing using parallel traffic, and there's not a lot of parallel traffic on that side of the street, the actuation traffic signal will turn in the middle of your crossing to give the street that you're crossing the green light, because they're not picking up any other traffics. They want that green light, the street you're crossing, to get moving. So you need that walk signal will give you the amount of time that you need to cross the street. It's your time to cross. And there's, again, different actuation types, semi-actuated controllers. Only one street is actuated. It's usually the quiet street, and a traffic comes up on it, it will change it back. The main street will have the green forever until some other traffic comes up on the minor street. A fully actuated intersection, it judges the length of traffic, how much traffic on each street, and they'll switch it as needed. And traffic volumes will vary over the course of a day. Also, not using the walk signal is sometimes this actualization changes from the morning commute, midday, and the evening commute. So just because you think you know how the intersection works does not mean you really do. And you should check with your traffic engineers to find out if it's fully actuated or semi-actuated. And the concurrent pedestrian phase is leading pedestrian interval, the
Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Unmute. Somebody take my, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right, fine. So we can also go into leading pedestrian intervals really quickly. I think this is something that's coming up around in Austin, and I only could see it because I had known about it. So I wanted to bring this to you as well. And again, thank you, Meg, for being the expert in this area.
LPI. And I mentioned this earlier, as a pedestrian signal displays the walk, the white stick figure with vehicles. All the vehicles are held with red for 3 to 5 seconds. This allows pedestrian to begin the crossing before the right turning cars and or the surge. So if you don't know this is an LPI and pedestrians start crossing and you're like, why are they crossing? You already missed, as a blind pedestrian, you're already missed the top of your walk signal, the most time to cross, especially if you're waiting for the surge. And drivers aren't expecting the pedestrians to cross late, and you may not have enough time to complete the crossing with the walk signal on. And again, if there's right on red, drivers will turn on the red signal. So there's a lot of things to be aware of. The pedestrian hybrid beacon is a new one we see. And the picture on the right, on the left, is someone's crossing a road. It's not a traffic light in the traditional sense. It's usually used for pedestrian crossings at wider cross streets or roundabouts or mid-street crossings. It's sometimes called a hawk. It functions differently from a typical signals. It's dark until it's called by the pedestrian, then it'll go to yellow, and then we'll go to red, and then that's your walk signal will go on, and then it'll go yellow, and then it will go dark. Cars can go during the flash don't walk cycle, which is the yellow flashing cycle. So if you're halfway across the street, the other street traffic, the other side of the traffic can start moving in the intersection. And the other issue is if what's the yielding compliance in your area? How do cars really work? You're seeing a lot more of these, so the yielding compliance has increased. It does improve yielding compliances, but again, there has to be a lot of education with the drivers. What the heck does this mean? A pedestrian hybrid beacon, the issues for pedestrians, they don't know it's there, can't find the button, vehicles may not stop, and it's confusing for drivers. And again, here's another picture of one on the right. It does say pedestrian crossing, person's in the road, it says stop on red, there's a sign, and there's two traffic signals that are red that indicate to the traffic to stop. Rectangular rapid flashing beacon, RRFBs, you're seeing a lot more of these around schools and whatnot. This is a yield, this is not a stop. The picture here is it's a race crosswalk. This happens to be, I think, in an airport. I see them a lot in airports. There's a picture of to warn the drivers of a pedestrian crossing, and then it has yellow lights, which are usually flashing. In this picture, of course, you can't see it's flashing. And the person would start their crossing when they felt the cars were yielding. In New England, we don't yield in New England. So you still have to be paying a lot of attention. And again, unless it's accessible, there's an accessible component, an audio component for this, you can't use it as a blind pedestrian. And that's why we have to advocate more for accessible pedestrian signals. And this is another picture of a rectangular flashing beacon. Sometimes they have a lot more signs on it. The yellow lights in the sign will flash a stutter pattern after the pedestrian button is pressed. Warning beacon to get the attention of drivers. Issues for blind people, they don't know it's there, can't find the push button, and vehicles may not stop. Now, we have them in Nevada, where I'm living now, and I have to say the compliance is pretty high. The traffic will stop for these, and it's a very wide street I'm crossing. So I find that very interesting compared to New England or Massachusetts.
So for you guys who are here live, go ahead and put in the chat if you are experiencing any of these types of intersections and traffic control situations, whether it be actuated lights or whether it is leading pedestrian intervals, hawk lights, or the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Everybody that I talk to has something like this going on, maybe not all of them, and maybe it's just a matter of like finding them. Yes, we have a lot of them. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Heck Marie, who's going to talk about accessible pedestrian signals. There are a lot of people in the chat saying that they do. Hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, so what is an accessible pedestrian signal, right? You're mostly familiar with it because we're O&Ms. So accessible pedestrian signal, a device that communicates information provided by pedestrian signal head in non-visual formats. For example, audible tone, messages, and viral tactile indication to pedestrian with blindness or low vision. Okay, so the question is how to cross the intersection using the APS, right? We know that there's some steps how we must teach our clients how to use the APS to cross safely the intersection. But personally, for me, I like to be 100% sure that my client knows how to analyze an intersection, right? For him to determine like how many lanes do we have? How many lanes is the street perpendicular to me, parallel to me? And I read on the shot, like, who is gonna be my blocker, right? Because we always need that information before using the APS. So first we're gonna approach the intersection and stop at the curb. And we need to make sure that our client knows the cues that make up a curb, right? Like sometimes we're gonna have truncated domes. We're gonna have the slope, the sidewalk is gonna go flat with the street, and we're gonna have perpendicular traffic. But at the curb, check for tactile cues along the curb to use to realign with when you come back to cross. And at the curb, we're gonna listen and evaluate the intersection to determine the traffic pattern and geometry. So we still need to get all the information of this intersection for us to have like this mental map of the street that we're about to cross. Then we're gonna leave the curb and we're gonna locate the pedestrian button to activate the accessible pedestrian signal and confirm that it's the correct pedestrian button for crossing the desired street. Why? Because sometimes we're gonna have one pole and we're gonna have two pedestrian buttons, one for the parallel street and one for the perpendicular. And sometimes we might need just to wave depending on the APS that we're working with. So we need to get that information of the street that we're about to cross. And then press the ped button and listen to the full cycle to double check the traffic information. Like, it's not just like pressing it like we're gonna cross. No, it's like I need to understand that the traffic that I'm hearing at that moment is going according of what I'm hearing from the APS to do a safe crossing. And when the perpendicular traffic begins to move, the client's gonna press the pedestrian button again. They're gonna line back up with that cue that he found out on the second step and get ready to cross when the accessible pedestrian signal announce the start of the pedestrian signal, because he's gonna wait for that cue that is the right time to cross the street for him, and then he will go. Okay, so here's just a short clip of a client lining up using the APS.
To clarify, he's just lining up at first. I'm sorry, that was my bad on the title. He's just lining up to get his line of direction using the traffic.
Nada aquí. Okay. Invisible.
So he also used the end of the curve to make sure that he was aligned correctly, because sometimes we're not gonna have the sound of traffic and we need to find things in the environment that tells us like, yeah, you're aligned correctly to cross the desired street. And this one is him preparing to cross 7th Street.
So I edited this and I forgot to show he did in this clip turn around and come back and find the ped buttons, and then that's where we are coming up to this editing here.
Yeah, because so in that poem, he first explored it because there was like two press buttons for him to press, like one to cross 8th Avenue and the other one to cross 7th Street. So first he made sure that he was pressing the correct one to cross 7th Street.
I also want to make sure that you guys know that I cut this clip was like a 4-minute clip of him going to the ped button, finding the ped button, and then going back, and he stood in the middle of, you know, the truncated domes, which were in a quarter circle, and he listened for a really long time as the traffic was going. And then after he understood where both of them were, then he lined back up. And then he went back and pressed the button, and that's where we got the editing from. So in that clip, what Heck Marie teaches them to do is to go to the curb, line up, find a tactile clue, and then turn back around, find the ped button. And of course, we know the accessible pedestrian signal is the signal started by, or called, as Meg calls it, by the ped button. And so after he understood exactly where he was, then, and his perpendicular traffic was going, then he went back and pressed the button and then lined back up, and then he was able to cross. There's so much more about crossing complex intersections, and there's so much more about APS devices that we could cover. We just don't have enough time, but I hope that that gives you a good understanding of like step by step, what can my students or my learners do in order to cross a complex intersection using an APS device? Because you definitely want to go at the very beginning of the walk signal for all the reasons that Meg just explained earlier. Does that kind of make sense, you guys? I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here because this is really important. Yes, Robert.
Yeah.
So there are two buttons on the same pole. Go ahead, Heckmarie.
No, yeah, like you mentioned, there was two pedestrian button on the same pole for him to cross. So that's why he took like all of his time to make sure like how the street was going, the search, and then which button he need to press in order to cross 7th Street.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because sometimes I find that a lot, that there are two buttons on the same pole, but what it's supposed to look like are two separate poles. And what we would love to see, of course, are two different curb cuts with two different poles. You don't have that there? What do you have, Robert? We're gonna keep going. One more to say. Okay, go ahead, Heckmarie.
Okay, so this section, I like to call it the APS paradox. And it's because we know that it's accessible pedestrian signal, but sometimes like how accessible is it, right? So society is thinking that the only way a person with visual impairment can cross the street is by using the APS. And we see that when we're teaching our client outside, that we might be just teaching, analyzing the intersection, and there's someone like, hey, there's another intersection with the APS where you can go for him to cross the street. Like, okay, cool. But the actual situation, and we as O&M know, is that APS are not at every crossing, right? And that's when O&M skills kicks in, and we as O&M can actually teach client and society, and also explain why our profession exists. Like, we need to teach them how to advocate for themselves and for them to be able to explain, like, I can cross a different intersection, not only with an APS. And I'm just gonna share this part about the situation back home, right, in Puerto Rico, since Cassie mentioned at the beginning of the session, I'm from Puerto Rico. So APA's location are mostly in metro area. You can see them in San Juan, Bayamón, Guaynabo. But I don't know if you have heard about Hurricane Maria. So after Hurricane Maria, APS and traffic lights were knocked down, and some were never repaired. And every day in some part of the island, like citizens are without power, and this affects traffic lights. So like a month ago, there was this new that I just shared the link if you want to check it out. It was about Luis. He's a TBI. Oh, that's actually a screenshot of the news. Luis is a TBI and he's also visually impaired. So he was announcing to the government like, hey, there's this APS here that I need to cross the whole intersection, and it's only working on one side. So after that, like I think in 2 weeks, it got fixed like this. But that was great because he was able to advocate for himself and explain why he needs that, right? But it's also a good example of if the APS is not working, you have a decision to make too. Like, are you gonna ask for help, or are you just gonna treat the intersection like it was a normal intersection without an APS and you're just gonna wait for that blocker to go with you? Or are you willing to go all the way to the other intersection that the APS is working. So it's a good thing that he shared that, because that helped, like, I think not only him, like a lot of people in the island, to understand why we need that fix. Okay, so this is another example. This APS is working only on one side of the intersection. So it's a plus shape intersection. You got 8th Avenue and 7th Street. The APS is only working to cross 8th Avenue, and you're gonna see that on 7th Street is just turned off. And this is a great example, like if the APS is not working on the other side, use your O&M skills. Like go with that blocker, wait for the cycle, and you can go to the other side. Or if you want to go all the way to another intersection with an APS because it makes you feel safe, you can also do it.
We have a question in the chat that I'd like to answer. Anna asked, could the same APS signal be used to provide crossing info for parallel and the perpendicular street, or is each button for one street only? So Anna, what it's supposed to be, what I believe Meg Robertson can correct us in the chat, but what the documents say are supposed to be happening is actually supposed to be one button on each pole, 2 separate poles leading to separate streets. But things are not always installed correctly. And so that's why you have a lot of poles that have 2 buttons. Now, I've personally never seen it where there's one button that does it for both sides. I have seen situations where sometimes you have to wave in front of it and then you end up pressing both and then get the accessible pedestrian signal for both. But Meg is in the room. She can give you information about that. And Donna is also in the room in case I am incorrect in that statement.
Okay. So another thing that I like for my clients to know, and that is something that Meg mentioned on the previous slide, is about that not every client knows the rectangle rapid flashing beacon. And you might have a client that is walking on the sidewalk and then he might hear like yellow lights are flashing. And he might say, what is that? Like, how does it work? So it's good for the clients to understand that they need to press it in order to activate those yellow lights for the traffic to yield and for them to be able to cross. But we also need to let them know for them to understand that what happened if the yellow lights are already flashing and you press it again? Is it gonna make any difference? Or is it gonna like reset the cycle? Or is it gonna extend your time of crossing? So it's better to teach them like, okay, this is this type of crossing. We're gonna activate it. We're gonna hear the beacon and that's where we're gonna go. Because most of the time we don't have that parallel traffic just for us to feel a little bit safe depending on our clients. And I just went to this street to teach my client like, hey, there might be sometimes that you find this and this is how they work. Is at the end of the day, it's your decision if you feel safe or not, because we're gonna have clients that they feel safe just hearing the beacon. But we also may have another client that says like, no, like I feel safe knowing that eventually I'm gonna have a blocker and gonna have that beacon too. So it's just a small clip of the
Yellow light are flashing. Yellow light are flashing.
Okay, let's go.
Yellow light are flashing.
I know, I'm working on it. So yeah, my client didn't like that, but she had the experience of knowing what it was. Okay, and the paradox here is, so here's a picture of a crossing, right? That is, the button is placed behind a construction fence. So it's a one-way street, and you can cross from south to north with no problem, but just keep in mind that your client's gonna find the fence in front of him, and he needs to go all the way around to get to the sidewalk. But to get to the sidewalk, he might find like cars parked there. But if the client wants to cross from north to south, he's not gonna have access because it's placed like behind the construction fence. So the day that we went to that part of the street, we went all the way around to the intersection. We went back to be able to cross that. So that's good because if the client has O&M skills, he might say like, okay, I can decide if I want to travel west and go to my nearest intersection, or I can just walk a little bit more and go all the way to east and do my crossing there. So again, like we need to teach them O&M skills so that way when they find these type of situations, they know what to do, not just stand there like, okay, what is happening? What is this? Just for them to keep moving and get to the place that they want to get. So that is why it's so important for us to teach them the basic crossing skills. Like it's not only like, okay, let's go and teach you how to use the APS. Like we need to be sure that our client understands the shape of the intersection. Like this is a plus shape, this is a T shape, and how do they go? For them to understand the traffic surge of the intersection, and for them to identify the parallel surge and their blocker. And for them to understand the difference between crossing at a stop sign intersection versus crossing at a light control intersection. And why is important? Because APS are not installed everywhere. Technology can fail, and a person needs to understand when is the right time to cross the street and comprehend any situation of uncertainty. And are they willing to take the risk? Are they going to ask for help?
All right. So we already have in the chat some questions around advocacy and who makes these buttons and how does it all work. I'm going to give you some resources that you can use for your own self so that way you can do some research and actually go find these people because they are just people, just like you and I, attending webinars about how to do things in the best way. Because really we are all just trying to make the world a better place. We're doing it in different ways and we have different perspectives, but we're all trying to do the same thing. So what I've done is I've taken Joanne Chalom's levels of advocacy and I've added one because I needed that. And then Meg Robertson has given us a lot of really great information in her other presentations that I've plugged into these, and we're giving you those resources as well. The first being self-knowledge. So you have to understand what is wrong here in order for you to be able to do anything about it. That's where you guys are asking who makes these. I'm going to give you some resources in just a second, and you'll be able to just like, well, in your email since you're here live, you'll be able to just click the link and go find out who actually is in charge of installing these devices. I would recommend these two resources for you to read through and get to understand what is supposed to be here to begin with. So that way you can advocate for your learners. Of course, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then Meg turned me on to this really cool document called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And in section 4, it goes through how they're supposed to be designed and how they're supposed to be installed and all that. What Meg says that has really stuck with me is the ADA is the shall. This is like what the law says. And the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control is the should. Like this should be done, but it's not always installed in that manner for whatever reason. And you guys in the chat have given good reasons as to like why one pole has 2 buttons because it's somewhere it was talking about it flooding in that area or something of that nature. There's a lot of different reasons that I don't personally understand. But if I don't understand what it's supposed to look like to begin with, I can't start to have that conversation. So what I had to do was actually go peruse through those documents and read through what is actually happening and get in touch with people and ask them, okay, am I doing this right? Before I go and say, hey, traffic engineer, you're not supposed to do it that way. I want to inform myself. The next level is to download. I was reading what Donna had said. Is to call or download the 311 app. There is a really cool app you could just download on your phone if you're in a major metropolitan area. If you're not in a major metropolitan area, I'm not sure if there's an app for you. When I looked through the app stores, it was much of the bigger metropolitan cities. So you could also just call. I've called 311 before, and it was a pretty easy and pleasant experience. I did have to call multiple times to get the thing fixed, but they did eventually take care of it. Now, what Joanne had suggested is to check who owns the road. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. So I looked it up, and you can Google property access map and then find in your city who owns that road. It's typically a city road, or it might be street or county or state road, but sometimes it's also private property. And so you want to make sure that you're trying to contact the right person. And overall, we want to stop working in silos and network with our local traffic engineers. That's going to be a big one. I haven't gotten to that level yet. Okay, for the state level, all of our states are going to be different, but the funding comes from the Department of Transportation. So if you look up the Department of Transportation, and then you can trickle that down into your own state and find out where the funding is going if you want to go to that level. And then Joanne had this great idea to find out who your student's representative is. And it's not something I've ever done, but I couldn't help but pass that information on to you because like, let's actually make some stuff happen here. Also at the state level, there's a state bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, and there should be a pedestrian and bicycle information center. We've got all these linked for you in the document that's coming your way if you're here live. On the national level, this is like big time. If you really want to get involved, you can research PROAG or the Vision Zero Network. Vision Zero Network aims to have no deaths at intersections, which I absolutely love. And you can contact the National ADA Centers. There's so many resources that we are giving you guys today. So definitely take a look at that document. But we've also been asked what apps we use. And I have to say, we set this out, like we set everything in motion. We had over 100 people signed up, and then I log onto Facebook and I see OKO costs $49.99, and I was like, oh, of course you did. Of course you did right now. I'm not going to recommend or not recommend any of these apps. You're going to have to do your due diligence, but there is an OKO app. Actually, I'm going to explain it a little bit.
The OKO
before
app
I go.
helps every traffic light.
We do a little different. Okay. The OKO app is compatible with the accessible pedestrian signals that have a white walking man signal or say walk. It's not compatible with all signals. And I heard this from Mahil himself, who now goes by Michael. They were trying to make it more accessible for all signals and all devices, but given the way that America works, you know, once something's installed, they don't just like, oh, there's a new one, we should update it. They wait till it breaks and then they fix it. And so some of you guys are going to have really great coverage and some of you guys are not. There are some other areas that it doesn't work. For me, I have needed it in crowded environments where there's a lot of pedestrians. And if someone walks in front of you, it's not working. Somebody also said, oh, there's something up here about OKO. about other times that it doesn't work. Oh, it doesn't work for further distances, somebody said. And there might be some other things. So it's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect. But apparently now it costs $49.99. Now, I will say that I have a tendency to delete apps off my phone if I'm not using them that day, if I need more space, and then I'll re-download them. I was able to re-download it and it works just fine. They have a new GPS part of it that I have not tested, so I can't say. Has anybody oh, it's $19.99 now. Okay, good. Okay. I couldn't get onto another phone to test it out, but I was like, I have to tell them. If you don't know how OKO works, I suggest going to YouTube and finding it. This is a really good video that we can watch real quick. Oh, it might help if I turned it on.
The OKO app helps every traffic light become accessible for visually impaired travelers. You simply point the back camera of the phone toward the intersection that you want to cross, and the app will instantly detect the traffic light and inform the user through audio and haptic feedback when it's safe to cross.
There are a lot of skills that you need with the OKO app. Definitely, if you're interested, research it. If you can't find the good information that you need, you're welcome to reach out to us, because we do have a recording with Mahil showing much more in depth, but I knew by the end of the presentation we weren't going to have that much time. Okay, and then because I was on that Facebook group, I also heard about a Ped app by Polara, but I have not tested this. And according to our Facebook group, it doesn't work, of course, everywhere, because it only works with Polara apps. Now, because
Polara, the
went forward, but it is free. I was able to download it. That's why I really like how it works, but I just haven't tested it because I haven't found that specific accessible pedestrian signal to work with it, but it could become more relevant in the future. So I'm just spreading awareness at this moment. Let's actually see if it'll work.
Polara, the leader in accessible pedestrian signals for over 20 years, introduces remote connectivity to APS to meet the needs of all pedestrians, including those with visual impairments, and also for any pedestrian who doesn't want to touch the button. You can remotely touch this. With Polara's INS APS, you can use Ped App for smartphones to remotely actuate the button. When activated, the app will alert pedestrians to any APS crossings, allowing the user to choose the desired crossing. Pick the desired crossing and swipe to move through the choices. Then double tap your crossing choice. Once the desired crossing is selected, the locate volume of that button will be increased to help guide the pedestrian to that button. When the pedestrian gets closer to the selected button, Ped App will place a call into that button. Wait for the walk indication. When the walk sign comes on, the phone will vibrate and announce,
"Walk sign is on to cross Market Street."
After the walk is finished, the pedestrian clearance comes on with either a locate tone or audible
2,
countdown.
1.
The don't walk sign is on.
For more info on Ped App, visit Polara.com.
So another option, I like what I see so far. Okay, we are getting towards the end of our presentation today. Big question, are you glad that you came to this training? I hope you were able to take something away from it. Nikki said that she can't wait for 2025, that it's hands down the best O&M information and collaboration with colleagues all around the world, and IOMOS always delivers high-quality presenters, relevant information, and leaves her feeling inspired to keep doing the work that she does. Look at all these yeses. Good, good, good. Okay, because I really want to make sure that this is actionable for you, will you put in the chat one new idea that you're going to implement? It doesn't matter if it's just like download the 311 app or look for more APS signals and maybe practice under blindfold, or bring my student to one so we can explore and see how we can go about it. Oh, we've got a bunch. Okay, OKO, they're going to download the OKO app, look for audible signals, trying the Polara app, check out the 311. Good, lots of apps. Very cool. Yes. And then someone said, and thank you for handouts. You are welcome. Great. Look at that. Okay. Now that you have these key strategies, and we just covered a little bit of one topic. How much of an impact will that make if you just implement one idea? Like, that's just kind of how our lives go. Like, we're going along and then we have one little idea and then it goes, choop, and like it starts off really small, right? But then it just keeps going and going and going. And eventually you're like, oh, I'm a completely different teacher. If you're like most going through this training, you're probably starting to see the possibilities, like downloading those apps or looking up those resources and seeing where you can improve your teaching. Carly said that IOMOS is priceless. It's an easy way to obtain CEUs and, more importantly, connecting with other professionals and staying up to date with technology strategies and ideas. And I think that's one thing that I love the most is connection, especially with you guys. And maybe you might be wondering what else you could be missing. And I can get that sometimes learning new strategies can feel overwhelming. So if you're in that spot, I get that too. But just know that these 21st century education techniques are really what's going to get you and your learners to a place where you feel so confident teaching and you know that you don't have to like keep spinning the wheel and doing things in a multitude of ways that aren't working. So how can you continue to discover the most cutting edge strategies with ease? Can you imagine skyrocketing your learner skills on a daily basis? Coming home after work and still having energy for your loved ones? These are my dance fam. Being fulfilled in your life and in your career, and having a community of other impactful O&Ms to lean on when things get tough. I want you to be able to be confident to voice your ideas and your opinions to peers and admins and have them listen to you because you really, truly know your stuff and have the respect that you deserve. And if that's what you are looking for, then I'm here to help you and waiting on the other side to do so with the International Orientation and Mobility Online Symposium 2025. Now, it's a transformational 3-day symposium for O&Ms. It's all from home, high-level conversations like this, discovering the most cutting-edge strategies and connecting with other O&Ms around the world. We just got to hear from so many different people just in this room alone. And of course, you can search all the information that you want. I don't know how long it would take you, but probably a long time. And you could do this, or you could search online, and having that information with that one sentence that they're going to give you is probably not going to give you the full picture. And honestly, nobody's ever said discovering the most current strategies from thought leaders is the biggest mistake I've ever made, or like I'm such a worse teacher because of it with the O&M Symposium.